welcome to the Maria Show. Today I'm going to be reviewing The School for Good and Evil, A World Without Princes. This is the second book in the series. This review is going to have spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, if you haven't read the book yet, maybe don't watch this video. So I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the entire plot of the book, and then I'm going to go into my thoughts, the things that I liked about the book, the things that I didn't like about the book, and I'm going to put the timestamp for when I talk about what I thought about it in the description and also in the comments, so if you want to skip there, then you can just click that. So this book opened up with Sophie and Agatha. They're back home now. They're in their village. I already knew that I was going to like Sophie because it opens up with her organizing a play about the events that happened in the first book, and my reaction was just like, oh my gosh, that's so Sophie. I love that so much, which I had no reaction like that in the first book. Like, I did not like Sophie. I thought she was annoying. I didn't think she had much depth, or she was very shallow, but right off the bat, I really liked Sophie. The author showed her internal conflict and her struggles right then and there. The stuff that I wanted him to go into in the first book, but now he's touching on right in the first chapters, and I really like that. Just how she's struggling and she regrets her actions in the last book. She's scared of becoming that evil witch again. She's finally grateful, and she sees how valuable her friendship is with Agatha, and so she's had a total switch around, and I really like her character now. Agatha, on the other hand, she is apparently not happy with how her story ended in the last book. She is dreaming, longing for, can you guess who? Tedros. Why? She is really hung up on this guy. She wishes that she chose her ending with Tedros other than Sophie. Again, why? So that's what's happening in the beginning of the books, you know, their thoughts and internal conflict that's going on. So Agatha is all hung up on Tedros now, and so she opens the portal accidentally. She doesn't do this knowingly. She accidentally opened back the portals into the School for Good and Evil's world, and so now like there's like these arrows and like all of these like axes and stuff. Someone from the woods, they're like, give us Sophie, give us the witch. Sophie has to hide out in their church to protect herself from the arrows that are trying to kill her. The arrows don't hit anyone else. They are directly aiming for Sophie. Even if it goes to strike someone else, it will like swerve and aim for Sophie specifically. Then the elders of their village, their town, they take Sophie and put her out into the woods. I think they like tie her to a tree, and it's really awful, and Agatha goes after her and like saves her. And of course they end up back into the School for Good and Evil's world. But they quickly realize that things have changed and something isn't right. The School for Good and Evil now is the school for girls and the school for boys. There's this new dean who claims to be Professor Cedar's sister, but it's kind of sketchy and no one's sure of it. But she sort of just literally showed up and took over the girls' school and is just the head leader, and everyone's scared of her. Yeah, Miss Dean Sater has some like 1984 stuff going on. Like literally like propaganda posters. She has these surveillance cameras basically in the form of these blue butterflies. They can't see visually they can only hear, but she basically like has them everywhere and is in everyone's business. Oh, and there's also this new girl named Yara, who I'm gonna talk about in a bit, but she's basically kind of like the dean. She just like showed up. No one knows where she came from, who she is. She doesn't talk. She squawks. So we don't know what's going on. Sophie and Agatha then learn that their fairy tale has become very popular. And now, because of their fairy tale ending the way it did, with the princess kissing the witch and them having their happy ending and leaving the prince, that completely shook up the fairy tale world. It seems like the people in this world just do not know how to balance things out. Now princesses and girls all over the universe is realizing like, oh, I don't need a prince to have my happy ending? Well, screw guys! Now all the fairy tales have been rewritten to not have princes in them. People are taking this revelation that you don't need a man in a fairy tale way too far. There was this one princess who literally yeeted her husband out and burnt his throne. All of the men are just homeless on the streets. Their kingdom's taken over by witches and princesses, and it's just insane. Miss Dovey and Lady Lasso, they explain to Sophie and Agatha that the end has been taken away from their story. Like the end, like the words have been removed, meaning that their story has been opened back up because someone wished for a different happily ever after. And that, of course, was Agatha. Professor Dovey and Lady Lasso, they explained to Agatha that her story ended the wrong way. That there was this moment when Agatha kissed Sophie and she was gonna go home, but Agatha, if she would have reached out for Tedros's hand, she would have stayed, and that would have been the correct ending. So those two are now encouraging Agatha that she has to go and kiss Tedros and have that be the ending. Have Sophie go home alone. So Agatha realizes that the person who has the bounty on Sophie, who wants to kill her, is the schoolmaster. And she's like, hold on, we killed that guy, like he's dead. What are you talking about? Is he alive somehow? What is happening? Guess who is the schoolmaster now? The schoolmaster has apparently been replaced. Can you guess by who? Tedros! Apparently, Tedros, Mr. Entitled, thinks that killing Sophie will rewrite his and Agatha's fairy tale. He thinks that Sophie stole his fairy tale from him, and he thinks that if he kills her, it will restore it. That is his thinking. Clearly a very sane person. Even though Agatha is faced with the knowledge that Tedros wants to kill her best friend, she is still wanting her happy ending with him. Again. Why? And then Tedros has the story and the thing that writes the fairy tales literally chained up in a tower as if it's a princess and he's the villain. Literally. Like, look at this. Chained up. It's trying to break free. Free him. So now Agatha and Sophie's goal is to get to the schoolmaster's tower, free the Storian so that they can write the end and go home. So basically they realize that Tedros has the Storian and they have to form a plan to get it. Agatha is all wound up on Tedros, and Sophie is just the voice of reason here, and she's just like, Agatha, he probably knows you're here and he hasn't even sent a note or tried to communicate with you in any way. Then after that, Agatha believes that she gets a message from Tedros telling her to meet with him by the halfway bridge. Agatha goes, makes it up to the schoolmaster's tower, and Sophie, she pretends that she doesn't know what Agatha is doing, but she follows her to the schoolmaster's tower and is there when she's talking with Tedros. So him and her are talking. She brings up how he sent a message to her, and then he basically says something like, oh, you're silly, like, I didn't send anything to you. And Agatha, after that, he says that, sort of has this, like, realization where she's like, oh, Sophie was right, like, he knew I was here. He didn't try to contact me. He didn't send a note. He didn't even try. And then she tells Tedros, like, oh, like, I thought you were doing this all for me or in some twisted way, but this whole thing, this bounty on Sophie, this is all about revenge. You just want your happy ending. This isn't about me. So they get in an argument, and Sophie is there, and she casts a spell that splits between them, and each one of them thinks that the other casts a spell to the other one. So then, Tedros, our favorite little entitled, blonde-haired, I don't even know the word, but it's a bad one. He, again, in his totally stable mind, he decides to send another bounty. Do you know on who? His supposed true love, Agatha. So now he wants to execute both Sophie and Agatha, just because Agatha was like, what the heck, dude? Then Tedros sets up this competition, this trial between the girls' school and the boys' school. And he says that if the boys win, we go back to good and evil schools and princes in fairy tales. And Sophie and Agatha now get executed. And if the girls win, they get male slavery. So Agatha and Sophie think, oh my goodness, we have to speed things up now. We have to find the story and write to the end so we can go home before the trial begins, because if the girls win, like, we're gonna die. They find this spell that can transform people into the opposite sex, and they give it to Sophie. She turns into a boy named Philip, which was the name that she would have gotten if she was born a boy, and she goes over to the boys' school and tries to look for the story Anne. She makes it over to the boys' school as a boy, and can you guess who her roommate is? I think you already know. It's Tedros. But I shouldn't even say roommate, because it's not a room, it's a cell. Sophie's put, or Philip, I should say, is put in a cell with Tedros. So Tedros has basically made the mistake of bringing the teachers of the School for Good and Evil back to life. Well, I should say the School for Evil. He's woken them from their spell that they were in, and now they have taken the school back and run it like a school again. After Tedros made the decision to have that trial, all the boys hate him now. The whole school is against him. They're mad at him because he made a chance for them to become slaves, and obviously they're not fond of that. The ending of the book is basically the dean tricks Agatha into thinking that Sophie is still the witch, and she tricks her. She actually does some sort of spell to make it look like she's transforming into a witch. Seeing that, Agatha, it sort of seals the deal for Agatha to choose Tedros over Sophie and to have her happily ever after with him. So in the midst of all that, the dean has the storybook, she has a story end, because that was missing for a little while. I forgot to mention that. But it turns out the dean had it the whole time. So Agatha kisses Tedros, and the storybook writes the N, and it doesn't write the D. The dean stops the pen from writing more. Then everyone's like, whoa, what's happening? And then she starts to talk to Sophie. Classic picture of the villain talking to one of the main characters in a weak, vulnerable state that she can be easily deceived. She basically tells Sophie, oh, you know, Agatha, she got her wish, but you made a wish too. Sophie's wish was that she could see her mother again. Sophie's like so broken at this point. She thinks no one loves her. She doesn't think she has a friend anymore. No one in this world loves her. And then she's told that she can have her mother back. The dean basically tricks Sophie into bringing the schoolmaster, the actual schoolmaster, back to life, believing that it was her mother. Because still the schoolmaster thinks that Sophie is his never after. Like I said, Sophie is so broken at the end of the book. She's so sad that she's not even very fazed at the fact that she was deceived. She's just like, oh my goodness, you like did all that for me? You actually love me? And so she goes with the schoolmaster and just accepts it because she thinks that that's the only person who loves her. Then Agatha starts to disappear. And then she's like yelling at Sophie like, no, like wish for me so that I don't disappear. And I was just thinking like, oh my goodness, like the irony. Literally that just happened seconds before, where she believed her own best friend turned into a witch and she chose her boyfriend over her best friend. And she was just going to send her home alone. Then she's crying out to Sophie for her to have her stay and for her to wish for her. Sophie obviously doesn't, because she doesn't think she cares about her. Tedros sort of goes with her. They disappear, I assume, back to their hometown, their village. And Agatha goes away with the schoolmaster. And that's how the book ends. So, what are my thoughts of the book? Boy, do I have some thoughts. So first off, this book was way, way better than the first one. The art for this one is so good. Like I said in the last one, I hate that they changed the artwork. I forgot to mention this in the last review, but I also really loved the illustrations at the beginning of every chapter. I liked this one. It's so funny to me. It's very 1984, literally like war propaganda poster of Sophie and Agatha. I thought this was really funny. I like this. This one of the Storian all tied up and trying to get loose. I really like this one. It's really pretty. This was another one that I really loved. I really loved Sophie, like I said in the beginning, just her internal conflict, her relationship with her father, her fear, her struggle of becoming a witch again. I really liked that. She was my favorite character in this book. I am really surprised about that because I thought my favorite character was always going to be Agatha, but she just changed so much in the book from the character that I used to like. Another thing that I really enjoyed about the book was the Witch Coven. I really enjoyed them in this book. I also liked how more self-aware the characters were. They seemed to constantly be thinking to themselves things that I was like screaming at them through the pages, and that was kind of funny to me, and I like that. So much of the book I thought was so well done, so well written. I'm just going to show you some examples of what I mean. The flame glue over a blue butterfly settled curiously on a grave, then stroked brighter, long enough to illuminate the carvings on the 2 unmarked graves beside it. A swan on each, one white, the other black. When I first read this, I was like, oh my god. I was going insane. What does that even mean? Like, the schoolmasters or Sophie's supposedly dead brothers? Like, what are the implications of that? And if they're her brothers, then how are they alive? They're supposed to be like hundreds of years old. What does that mean? And also, did Sophie kiss her potentially dead brother in this book? Because they kissed in the end of this book, and they might be related. So kinda incesty, don't like that. Far across the bay, in a dark room window, Agatha looked out at the school for boys, her blue blouse splotched with blood, her arms and legs scratched and bruised. Hurry, Sophie, Agatha prayed. For if what she'd learned today about the dean was true, they were already out of time. But the night came and went in a gust of cold, and Sophie did not come back. I just loved these last series of chapters and how they all ended with a suspenseful, mysterious ending, and then it was explained in the next chapter. It really pulled me through until the end, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked that part in the beginning of the book where Agatha thought that Sophie was turning into a witch again. It really made me think that she was turning into a witch again. I just thought that part was like really well written, and I enjoyed that. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed the book. I think I would rate it like a 4, maybe even 5 stars. But now to get into things that I didn't necessarily like about the book. So one of the things that I didn't like was the whole thing with Yara. I really liked her in the beginning. She was just like a random character. She was just here for no reason. She squawked. But I was thinking that she was going to be this like big deal. Like I was like waiting for this big reveal. And then it turned out to just be Tristan disguised as a girl. He had taken the same potion that Sophie had. And I just felt like that was kind of a letdown. I wasn't a fan of that. Another thing that I didn't like about the book, and I've been noticing this since the first book, it seems like the author really likes to queerbait, which if anyone doesn't know what queerbaiting is, it's basically when a writer of a show or a book suggests or hints at a character being a certain sexuality or two characters being in a gay relationship, but then they like hint at it, but it never happens. The character is never confirmed to be canon, or the relationship is never canon. A lot of people find it offensive and just like annoying, which I completely understand, because like it is like, how are you going to hint at something so much and then not acknowledge it or do the thing that you're hinting at? So an example of some things that I found kind of queerbaity is even in the first book, like I thought that the author was hinting at that Agatha had a crush on Sophie, and Sophie and Agatha even kiss at the end and have their happy ending. She brings her back to life. And I thought that maybe the author was even setting them up to be in a relationship, maybe. Then in this book, Tedros might be gay or bi or something, because Tedros falls in love with Philip. I know that he was like falling in love with like the soul of Sophie. Sophie's a girl, but Tedros thought it was Philip. Like, he kissed Philip. He didn't think it was Sophie. He thought he was kissing Philip. So yeah, the author keeps doing these little things, but not acknowledging it or making anything canon, and it's kind of annoying. And if he's not gonna do anything with it, then like, what's the point? I'm obviously on the second book, so I don't know what happens in the series as a whole, but that's just what I'm picking up on, is like, I don't think there's gonna be anything like that. It's just queer baiting. So yeah, that's the part that I don't like. I also just, again, did not like Agatha and Tedros's relationship. It was just, they literally, I don't think they've even had a full conversation yet. Like, literally in the second book, like, the author was obviously, there was like foreshadowing that Tedros and Agatha were each other's true loves, apparently. But throughout the first book, like, Agatha hated him. And then literally at the end of the book, she decides that she's in love with him, and still in this second book, she still thinks she's in love with him, and they haven't even had like a conversation. They weren't even together in the book that much. The most chemistry that the author has ever written between Tedros and someone else has been between him and Philip. Him and Sophie as a boy. So I know that the author is capable of writing chemistry and hinting at and like making them characters flirt, but just like, if you can do that, why wouldn't you do that with Agatha, who seems like the person you're trying to get them together? Just, I hated how Agatha was just so obsessed with him for like no reason. There's no chemistry between them. Honestly, Tedros and Philip had the most relationship development between Agatha and Tedros and Sophie, like, by far. Tedros, literally the entire book, he was just set in his mind that he was going to kill Sophie, and then in the second half of the book that he was going to kill Agatha. And only literally in the last few chapters, I think it was literally the second to last chapter, where Sophie as Philip kind of talk to him about murder and how it's wrong. Philip, Sophie as a boy, is like, murder, it's not just you, a prince, killing a dragon in self-defense of you and your princess. Like, murder, like, it will haunt you. You will have nightmares, like, because she has experienced that. She still carries guilt from the first book of killing that wolf. And after that little chat, Tedros is still set on killing both of them until he sees his best friend Tristan. I don't know if he was his best friend, but his friend Tristan, he got cut in the neck by Aaron. He was disguised as a girl. And after Tedros sees that, he's like, oh my goodness, I can't do that to someone. And he just like has this realization. He's like, you're right, Philip. Murder is bad. Literally in the second to last chapter. I'm not even lying to you. I guess, sort of the theme of the book, like the last one, it was sort of good versus evil, and that book was sort of talking about how things aren't exactly black and white, good or bad, and it sort of touched on that. And this one, it was boys versus girls, and it was talking about, the conflicts between the two, and how that also isn't black and white. And it seemed to also be sort of a critique of feminism and how that can be taken a little too far, and how feminism, it should be about like girls princesses should choose how their own story ends. Like, if a girl wants to have her Prince Charming and all that, or she wants to be an independent woman and, I don't know, have a career, like, both are fine. It's about choice, and you shouldn't be judged or condemned for either one. That's what I thought that the author was trying to come across in this book. Both are very complex philosophical messages to put in a kid's book, I thought. I'm still surprised that this is middle school grade, because just a lot of the stuff in it, like, some parts seem to be sexually suggestive, slightly, like, there's a lot of curse words. Like, I didn't know that there can be curse words in a kid's book until I started reading this series. And just the topics that it talks about, like I was saying, like the themes and messages that I think the author is trying to convey in the books are just very complex and philosophical. I think it's definitely for older kids, like at least like maybe 14 and up, like definitely like teen, young adult, I think it should have been. So yeah, that was my thoughts. If you want to say what you thought of the book, please comment down below, because I really would love to read that. I want to know what other people thought. And if you like this video, please give it a like so I know. And I guess I'll see you in the next video, where I'll review the third book. Oh dear. Bye.